Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are in this world. Welcome to the Joy of SharePoint. Today, we're going to be talking with you guys about taking the fright out of Flow. Microsoft Flow is definitely making waves in the Office 365 community. It is a fantastic tool, and my colleague Terrence McCleary is here with us today to kind of walk us through some neat stuff that we can do in Flow, get a good idea of the overview and the capabilities. It is more than a document approval tool. Am I right about that, Terrence?
Absolutely.
So let me get these slides going. First off, Terrence, you are almost as old as I am when it comes to SharePoint, 10 years. Um, Development, design, implementation, SharePoint, Power Apps, Flow, all big buzzwords in the Office 365 world. I'm guessing with workflow, you may have gotten your start with either Visual Studio or SharePoint Designer workflows.
Yes, built a lot of SharePoint Designer workflows in my day, my time with SharePoint.
You done your time. You didn't sound too upbeat about
No, I've been doing it for a long time. So from 2007 SharePoint Designer up until 2013 and now Flow. So
which,
built a lot of workflows.
which do you like better?
I'm really liking Flow. All the capabilities that they have for, and which we'll talk about, connecting to other applications and things like that. I mean, it's definitely evolving, and Microsoft's adding more and more to it that makes it great. But yeah, I'm really digging Flow.
Fantastic. So, okay, guys, I hope you have like a caffeinated beverage or some sort. 'Cause, you can't do SharePoint without caffeine. That applies to Flow as well. And let's just jump in, right? Let's talk about it. So it is time to modernize those old, dusty processes, right? I hope you like my Halloween theme slide here. I'm not a spider person, but hey, it's Halloween. Um, this last week I was actually working with a new client on site. They still have paper that comes into play, and a lot of folks do, right? We still have some processes that, for one reason or another, maybe we never jumped on board with on premises SharePoint. Maybe we had it, but we just couldn't iron it all out, or maybe it couldn't really do what we wanted. So we thought, what's the point? We'll just keep doing it the old way because we know it will get done right. So we're going to talk about that. Talk about the fact that there's a new world of tools available for you. I'm sure you're aware, if you're in SharePoint Online and Office 365 now, that it's almost like a Swiss Army knife of tools at your disposal. SharePoint is a piece of that, a big piece, but still it's part of it. Flow is another. Flow is SharePoint agnostic. It's kind of how I like to say it. You can build a flow that doesn't have anything to do with SharePoint. You can have connectors, and we'll look at a few of those here in a bit, but that can reach into your enterprise applications and even out into the broader world today. I think we're going to look at social media. So it's not just SharePoint. So if you've got processes that need to evolve alerts and notifications, things that may touch SharePoint but need to go other places as well, we can absolutely do that. But before I turn Terrence loose and let him show us some really cool stuff with Flow, I want to kind of talk about some do's and don'ts. And Terrence, feel free to jump in if you have any amusing stories. We love stories on the Joy of SharePoint. But there's some things to do, and there are definitely some things not to do when we start thinking about workflow and processes. So let's start with the what not to do. If we're new to SharePoint or we're new to Flow, we're new to workflows, it's rarely a good idea to pick a company-wide process and just jump in. Especially if we're not really researching, we're just going to go to the Flow app, open it up, and just start building an onboarding process with no documentation. We don't have any diagrams out there of what this really looks like, all the nooks and crannies that it involves. It starts to get frustrating for our users because they think oh, we're building a flow. It's going to be great. We're going to automate everything. But we've not tested. We haven't documented the process up front. We haven't done a lot of research to see how the tool is going to work with our infrastructure. So it's probably better to take a step back and start small. Analyze our process, have a diagram. We love pictures. Pictures are everything. Um, it could be a Visio, it could be a whiteboard drawing, whatever it is. We have to remove any instances of sometimes. Sometimes it goes here, sometimes it goes there. Mary does this a lot, but sometimes she doesn't feel like it, so she sends it to Bob. Right. Workflow can't work with sometimes. It has to be a defined process. Research. Obviously, we're going to talk about Flow today because that's the go-to for Office 365. Practice. There are so many templates inside of Flow. It is ridiculous. And some of those might be really close to what you're actually needing to do with just a few tweaks. So jump into those templates, take a look. I think you will be amazed and really impressed at what's almost out of the box ready to go for you. And then test. Test early, test often, test with small steps before even fleshing out the whole thing. Just make sure this little piece works, and then you can build the fanciness into it. And make sure if you do loop in some business folks to be a part of this, that they understand this is a new thing. We're testing it. You are a guinea pig, and we appreciate the effort. Just let them know we're in this together to kind of flesh it out. All right, I promise we're doing all these slides up front, and then we're going to get into the good stuff. So what can Flow do? What can you use it for? Email, productivity, collecting data from users, even pushing data out. We love the whole, and I don't mean this in the company, but the lowercase Dropbox thing sometimes, right? We present a form to somebody, we give them something to fill out. Flow can take that information and put it where the user isn't allowed to go. Really help with things like that. Notifications, and even social media. We love social media. If you guys follow me on Twitter, you know I love my Twitter. Flow can work with you in Twitter. Quick preview of templates. Start an approval when a new item is added to a library. So we see that SharePoint's involved with that. We've got Outlook involved with that. Save an Office 365 email attachment to your OneDrive. Get updates from blogs out there. I've been working with Flow to set up notifications when new Teams, SharePoint, and Flow blogs are published. I get a notification about it, so I'm not having to go out there and look for it. I just let the information come to me. Lots of ability out there to build into your Office 365 environment, because it's all about working smarter, not harder, right? Okay, you guys are being quiet today. All right, it's demo time. So we got through the PowerPoint slides. Enough of hearing me talk. I am going to make Terrence the presenter, and he is going to show us some wild and wonderful things with Flow.
All right, let me share my screen here. Make sure I'm sharing the right one. All right, you guys see, Joy, you see the Flow kind of homepage here?
I sure do.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Joy, for taking us through the slides and kind of giving an intro. My portion here, guys, is really just to kind of give you a demo, to kind of take you on a tour of Flow and what's available, even create a basic approval workflow to talk about some of the features that are here in Flow. Flow is basically an application that helps you build automation for your business processes. And it works for both Microsoft and non-Microsoft applications, which makes it really great. So if you're using something else for project management, or using something else for communication, or things like that, it's doesn't have to be built on SharePoint, for example, like Joy mentioned already, even though that's where a lot of my examples come in, and that's where a lot of things I use. We can still connect to a lot of different places. There's kind of two main things that we're going to put inside of our flows. We're going to put a trigger, and this trigger will be, what happens to cause this flow to start. I add a new document to a document library, or we add something to a calendar, or something happens in a blog post or something like that. Something has to happen for this to trigger, or maybe the trigger is I'm clicking a button or a link somewhere. So we'll put a trigger into our flow. And then the other things that are going to go into a flow is our actions. What's going to happen? What are the steps that are going to take place after this flow starts? So we'll look at those. All of these triggers and actions are available only because of connectors that Microsoft has given us. And Joy showed or talked about it briefly, but I'll go in and show different connectors. Connectors is, again, what allows us to work with those products that may be non-Microsoft, but also those that are. So the connectors will give us kind of what we're allowed to do inside of that flow. So where I'm at right now and kind of what I'm showing on my screen is what I'll call the flow homepage. If you just go to flow.microsoft.com, I log in with my Office 365 account, it'll take me here. I can also get here a number of different ways. Again, maybe I'm in SharePoint, I can go to the waffle icon and get to flow, or maybe I'm in a list or a library. There's also a flow icon here to get me to create flows, which all take me back again to kind of this homepage. Going across the top again, just to kind of start the tour here is, I'll come back to my flows. That's definitely where we'll go to start building flows or seeing flows that already exist. We'll come back to approvals because that's going to be one of my examples. But the next two are templates and connectors. So templates are a great place to get you started, right? So these are ones that say Microsoft has said, hey, I think a lot of our customers are going to want something like this, right? Are going to want something like, start an approval when a new item is added to SharePoint, right? We can see that's involves SharePoint and involves approval and obviously email or Outlook. So there's a lot of different templates that fall into different categories. Again, approvals, or maybe ones that might be kicked off by a button, or might be involved with events or calendars, or might be special to mobile. So there's again a ton of different templates that are available, and really it's hard to go through them all. That's one of the things I suggest you guys to do when you first start off with Flow, is kind of go through these templates and see where a good starting place might be of ones that are already created for you or partially created for you. We'll see those templates more as we go. The other piece is connectors. This is where I said this is where our triggers and our actions come from. These are connectors from applications that, again, just saying it again, from both Microsoft. You can see things like Outlook, you can see OneDrive, Office 365 users to grab information from users inside of the organization, maybe SharePoint. Obviously, those are all Microsoft products, but we can also see stuff from non-Microsoft vendors, Twitter, social media, project management applications, and other CRMs and things like that that are available here. I got 200, around over 200 connectors. I think the last count, when I counted the other day, maybe 215 connectors, and Microsoft's adding them every day or every month. They're adding more. So again, something else. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's interesting. There's even one for K2 workflow.
Absolutely. Couples for connecting signatures on documents and things like that. So again, lots of them to go through. And another suggestion is just start here and just kind of scroll through them, see if there are any applications that you guys currently use that you can help to automate a process that's from those applications. You might notice there are some that have a tag of premium on them. So any of them that have premium require a premium license or a Flow 2 license to be able to use those. But the good majority of them, just having an Office 365 A business license or enterprise license will get you what you need to have access to Flow. Please also, if you have any questions, post questions in the questions section, and we'll try to answer them as we go as well. Okay, so now let's say that we want to create a flow. So I'm going to start off with, I'm going to click on My Flows. And this is going to give me a spot to create a new flow. It's also going to give me a section to see any of my flows that I've created, or possibly flows that are available that maybe someone else in my team has created, and they've invited me to that flow, or they've added me as an owner of that flow. Okay, so anything in my flows are ones that you are just the owner of. You created, and nobody else is as an owner or can edit those flows. Team flows are ones that multiple people have permissions to edit and manage the flow. So that's kind of how they're organized here. If we wanted to create a new flow, again, we could see templates down here. They kind of give us some suggestions. Otherwise, I have a couple of options here in the upper right-hand corner to create from blank or to create from a template. Again, create from a template just uses those templates that we kind of quickly browsed through earlier. I'm going to create from blank. Again, even though I clicked on create from blank, they try to suggest that here's some popular, maybe not templates, but triggers of what you might want to start your project off or your flow off with. An item is created, or when a feed item is published. Excuse me, pardon me. But I'm still going to say I want to create from blank, just because I want to show you from the very beginning how we can start and get both triggers and actions. So the very first thing you need to add to your flow is what is the trigger? How is this flow going to kick off? And it starts off by showing you different connectors. In my example, let me take a step back and kind of show you what my process is going to be, or what I'm trying to do with my example. So I'm in SharePoint. I added a list, and the idea behind this example, rather than doing just a normal, say, document approval process, I wanted to bring something else in that required maybe some other connectors. So this is, we're saying anybody in the company is allowed to come to this list and post what and add to this list what they might want posted to social media. I'm going to use the example of Twitter, right? So anybody in the company can come here. They can say, you know, here's my title. Here's what I want to post in my tweet, or what I think the company should be tweeting about. I didn't add this, but maybe there's a column for the reason why, or some background on what it's for. So the idea is somebody posts something to this list, and an email goes off, or an approval goes off, maybe to the marketing manager to review it. And then once the manager approves it, Flow can automatically post that to wherever, but in my example, we'll post it to Twitter. You could schedule things, you know, you could say, yes, I approve it, but I want this to be posted on Friday, or something to that effect could all be added to the flow process. So that's kind of what I'm building here as my example, an approval that also connects to something that's non-Microsoft to post information to. All right, I'm going to come back here. I'm going to go back to my flow I was creating. So my trigger needs to be when something is added to a list in SharePoint. Now I can get to that a number of different ways. If I don't quite know what it's called, I could start using these connectors down here, and I can start narrowing down what appears below, right? Because this is showing everything from kind of every connector. If I have, have an idea of what this might be called, this trigger, I can also start typing in. So like if I typed in item, for example, it would start filtering this list, and I can see anything that might have item in the name. You know, for a selected item, when a file is created. If I skip down a couple, I can see when an item is created inside of SharePoint. So you can use text to sort, or to filter your results, or you could just click on the different connectors here to start filtering those results. All right, so when an item is created. So when an item is created, again, I want to pull it from here. This is the list that I'm trying to pull from. This is the site that I'm trying to pull from. I'm just going to copy that because I could potentially need that here in my next step. So there's two requirements out of this trigger. I need the address of the site where the list is on, and then the list that we're looking for. So I can click the drop down and it may pull up the values of recent sites that I have. In fact, it will. I have a lot of different sites that are there, but because this is not a site I use very often, I'm going to paste that URL in here and I'll let it load the list of the lists on that site. And I can see the name of my list is Flow Demo Social Media Approval. All right, so there's the first thing. There's the trigger. As soon as something's added to that list, kick off the flow. Next thing I need to add, and I mentioned are actions, right? So I clicked on the button. Now I get a list of actions, and again, these are all kinds of actions that all revolve around all the connectors that we have. Now the action that I want is actually an approval. So I'm going to type in approval. And I can see down here, again, there's some different ones that are here, but I'm going to start an approval. And then I'll get the settings or options for that approval. So it starts off with just, who's going to, not just who's going to approve it, but if I give you a list of approvers, so let's just say there's potentially 10 approvers, do I just need one of those 10 people to approve it, or does everybody need to approve it? Okay, so I'll start off by just saying any one person. So I might send it to 10 people, but one person is the designated approver. Let's see. So then again, additional requirements based on my first setting. So the first one that I have here is the title. So I'm just going to type in a title here. This is going to be for the email will have this in it. So I'm going to say review new social media request. I'm going to assign it. Now you might notice on the right hand side a panel opened up, and this panel is going to show you properties of any of the actions or triggers that are above wherever you're at right now, right? So I'm in the create an approval. So the only other trigger or action that's above it is this when an item is created. So I can actually get values and get information from that item that's created. So when the item is created, it knows, for example, in this example, it knows who created the item, right? So I could pull in a created by email or a modified by email. I could go look up their manager, for example, or I could go into a SharePoint list, just like some type of mapping of who the approver is based on department or some setting. In this case, for assign to, I'm just going to assign it back to me so that I get the approval email. There it is. I can also list who the requester is. Basically, this flow runs underneath my name. So essentially, you receive, we'll see this later, we'll receive emails and stuff that come from my name since I'm the one that owns this flow. So the requester might be necessarily just so they know maybe who filled this out. So I say created by email. I can type any type of details about that request. For example, and again, this is going to show up in the email. So I might say, well, I want the body of this to show up in the details. I want to give them a link to the form that I filled out or maybe the document that I uploaded. So there is, again, using the content from the when an item is created. It does a good job of showing the majority of them, but there is a see more button. Potentially there might be some columns or fields that are not displayed initially. Let's see, so there is one called link to item. And then the link item description, I'm just going to use the title. Again, we'll see that in the email. All right, so let's test that first. Let's see that work and see how flow is kicked off and things like that. So I'm going to give this flow a name. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, I'm going to give it a name. I'll just call it social media review. I'm going to save it. You can see here at upper left-hand corner, it's saving. Okay. Let's see. So let's kick this off, I guess. I'm going to go to my form or to my library. I'm going to put a new item. I'm just going to call this test right now. just so we can see it. Typing too fast here.
It's hard to type when you know people are watching.
I can't type and talk at the same time either.
Oh,
all right, there we go. All right, so I'm going to click save. Sometimes on the first one, it takes a second for that flow to kick in, so hopefully we don't have to wait too long. Hopefully it usually is pretty instant. But I'm back on where I was creating this flow. If I click the back button here, the little arrow, it'll take me to kind of a dashboard of that flow. Good, it kicked off, I can see that already. So it tells me here's the social media review flow, here's the description, here's the connections that I have, again, to SharePoint and approvals, potentially who's the owner of this flow. I'm the only one right now. And I can see right away that this flow has started, it's running. Okay, 14 seconds ago, and I can click on that, and our flow is very, very short right now, right? But I can click on that and see where the flow is at in the process. So I can see that the green check mark here in the top right of when an item is created, that started it, and I can see that start and approval is where it's at right now. Now I'm hearing some emails come in, so I'm going to, on my other screen here, I'll pull it over for you guys to see. Let that open up here. I apologize, I'm just not seeing where my email is opening. I'm sure it's opening behind something else. Apologize, guys, I'll find it here. There it is. It's coming up behind all of my GoToMeeting and webinar stuff. Okay, so here's the approval email. So it's depending on version of Exchange and whether it's on premises or whether it's in Office 365, might depend on what this email looks like a little bit and kind of how it acts. So this is all Office 365 for my example, and what that allows me to do is it allows me to get an approve or reject button right in the email. So for example, I can click approve, I can type in a message or a comment or feedback, and I can submit that all without leaving my email. Also, should have mentioned it before I click submit, but if you looked in the body of the email, there was all the information that we told for the approval. What to put in the details, what to put a hyperlink to it to review it, things like that were in there before I clicked approved. If you have
quick question for you on that email. If you click that show original message, will it show?
Yep. It's there's my link. Yep. There's the body of the message. Okay. And there's the link that I told it, and that was all information that we put in that approval. Okay. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Okay, so that's a good start. We saw the approval work. We were able to approve or reject it. If I come back here, I can see that it was successful. But now I want to add more to it, right? So I'm going to click edit. And maybe I would definitely want to notify the user that started this approval what happened, right? That it was approved or that it was rejected. I also have a approval status column. This is a feature of either the list or the library on who should see this information, right? A normal, say, end user doesn't see that information until it's been approved. So right now it says pending. I didn't tie that in with the workflow yet. Okay, so we'll do that as well. So I'm going to go to start approval here. Underneath it says next step. The next thing I want to do is send an email. Okay, so I'll say send an email. And notice there's 3 that say send an email that are all Outlook related, right? So one says send an email. One says send an email from a shared mailbox, and the other one is with options. Now the with options is so that you can have like actual buttons like a survey kind of for your email. But the other 2, I mentioned already that this flow runs underneath my name. So even though you guys might have kicked off the flow by adding a document or adding something to a library, it still runs under me. So it's all the things that I have permission to do, and it's also all the actions are running under me. So when an email gets sent, the email comes from me. And that's not always desired, we'll say, right? I don't always want it to come from me. I want it to come from maybe a generic workflow account or something like that. So you do have the ability to send an email from a shared mailbox. And the caveat is that you or I would have to have permissions to send on behalf of that account. So that's an option as well. And then when someone receives the email, it'll look like it's coming from whatever that shared mailbox address is. Okay.
Question for you. If, let's say, we're in marketing, we're setting this up, and we have a Office 365 group for marketing, is that a shared inbox or shared mailbox we could use for this?
No,
Okay.
it's got to be a shared mailbox because you have to be able to go in there, at least not to my knowledge.
Okay.
I believe it has to be I believe it doesn't work because you have to have that send to feature. And now that's something I can test. I'm trying to think back to see if it's something that I've tried before.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe my quick answer was no, just thinking through it, but it would definitely be something that I'd want to test to know 100% for sure.
And I've got a question from Shelly. Who does the email come from if there are multiple owners?
Good, yes. So there are potentially multiple owners, but there's only one connection. So if I go, let me save this. Well, I haven't really changed anything yet. Let me just X out of there. Let me go back. So I could have multiple owners, but because the connection is under my account, then it's going to be coming from me or whoever has that connection.
That makes sense.
I also see some questions or comments about when I was creating the start an approver, it had a kind of like an error. It was red for that assigned to information. So there was a couple of comments on that. It's just not recognizing that it was an email initially, and you can see that it corrected itself on its own. Also, I believe somebody mentioned if you remove the semicolon, then that might have also kind of fixed or triggered the message to go away right away. But it's common a lot for when you're pulling users in from your directory from a picker, that it's not recognized as an email right away. But again, you can see that it fixed itself. All right, so I'm going to add my action back in. Again, I'll go back to send email.
Some more questions, and this is very common in the world of Flow right now. It's like, can we make the email come from the name of a SharePoint site, or what do we do if we're creating the flow for someone else? And I've seen people in the community too asking questions about, well, can we have a service account that we can log in as and create it maybe as that service account and then add other individuals as owners once it's created? Have you done much of that or worked around ways to kind of make that email address seem a little less personal?
Yes, that's definitely a common question and something that we run into quite a bit. So you have a couple different options. I've definitely used that service account in the past, right? Creating a specific service account for Flow. So all of them come from that service account. One of the questions was, can we look like it came from a specific site? I'm not sure about that, but we definitely could have an account that it can run under. The other thing that you could create a flow for someone else, and in terms of like the email, you again would have to have permission to send an email on their behalf or using their account. So that's a permission that they could give you in their email. That's a setting of Outlook, but that would have to be done for you to be able to use their email address. They would have to give you that permission. So again, generic emails, like a service account, that's I use that quite a bit. So that's a good one to get around it.
Yep, that's an old tried and true method. You don't use service accounts, and if Flow Creator leaves the company, Flow will fail. Yeah, if that account gets disabled, that's a good point. If the user account gets disabled, you can run into problems in the future. So yeah, I think service accounts a smart, smart, smart way to go.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so I'm going to send an email. I'm going to say, I'm going to send it to whoever created the item. Again, now we can see both our trigger and our action that's above the send to email, so I can pull information from either one. But I'm going to create it by email. Subject, again, I could use, because I'm in a more of a text field now rather than it looking for an email, now I have more fields over there on the right-hand side. So I might use something like, let me scroll down, the title, do this a lot. Let me put my cursor over there. Sometimes your cursor moves from where you're at, so you have to be careful, just like it's doing right now. There we go. And then I could use the response from the approval. So I could use information from that, who the approver was, their approver name, comments that that approver typed in, the comments that I typed in that email that I approved, what the response was. So was it approved? Was it rejected? So that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to put the title, and then I'm going to put the response. So it'll say, you know, whatever the name was, dash approved or rejected. And the same thing in the body. I might type in, again, I can't type and talk at the same time. So I might type in things from that to put in the email, just so they remember if they post a lot, which one it was. And again, I could keep going, who approved it, what the approver date was, and then I could keep pulling in information to those fields in the email. The email by default is text, is plain text. But if I click on this show advanced option and you have any type of HTML knowledge, you could say that this email was HTML, and I could start putting HTML tags in the email itself, right? So I could come in here, if I can get my cursor where it needs to go, and I can say this is heading 1. Just to enhance that. Again, you wouldn't, because it's HTML, you wouldn't see the tags. You would just see the formatted text. I'm not going to format the entire thing, so I'm going to take that off right now. But it is something that I do a lot. A lot of times I'll change that to HTML to enhance the email. You can also send this with importance, high importance, low importance, or normal. So you can just see a couple of the other things to do from here. Also, here's where you can see that send, that from. But again, it requires send as or send as behalf. You can see that right in the description there. So you have to have permissions to do that. All right, so moving on, just to see some different actions. Let's see which one. Oh, I want to set the approver actually in the list. So I'm going to say content approval status should be one that's in there. And I'm going to set, let's see if I still have that. There's the site I'm trying to pull in. You'd think it would kind of know it, but you kind of, the way that it works, you have to map it again to tell it exactly what site, what library, what exact item we're trying to update. So when an item is created, it's the ID. And then what's the action? Are we trying to approve it or reject it? In my case, I'm going to enter a custom value because I'm going to go ahead and utilize what was part of the approval. So what was the response of that approval? So now no matter whether it was approved or rejected, it's going to put the right one in there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and finish this off. So one more, well, we're going to add 2 more things. We're going to add a condition because I want to do something else if it's approved versus what I want to do if it was rejected. So if it was approved, I might want to, I was giving the example of post a tweet on social media. So if I come here, again, one of the actions is a condition. And I can say, if the response of the approval is approve, then do this, whatever's in yes. If it was rejected or something else, then it's going to be whatever happens in no. I'll add an action inside the yes. And I actually happen to see it right here. So I could also just click on one of the connectors, like Twitter, and post a tweet. But you can also see, get a list of my followers, get following, get home. So these are all every connector is different in terms of what you can do, and you can only do what Microsoft has, programmed the connection to settings for that connection. So I can post a tweet, and I could say, well, I want that to be, again, just kind of using the same thing over and over again. I want that to be the body here. So now I can save that. One of the nice things is, since we've ran this flow, I'm going to change it up for this one, but one of the nice things is, since we've ran this flow before, I also have this test button in the upper right-hand corner, and I could tell it to test on the one that has already been processed, right? Maybe it failed last time because I didn't have a value in there, right? So I could run that same one again without having to add another item to my list. So that definitely helps when you're creating a flow. It definitely helps when you're creating a flow to be able to test it over and over again, especially when you're trying to troubleshoot something that you might be creating. All right. Okay, so let me add, I'm going to go ahead and add one more. I'll say the title is thank you, and I'll just say thank you for joining the webinar today. And I'll save. Go back to Flow. One thing I'll mention is it did create another connector. Because I went to Twitter, it would ask me what my Twitter handle is and what my password is. Now that's a connection that I've made in the past. So your connections are saved. If I go to this gear, you can see connections here. That would be a list of all my connections and the status of those connections in terms of passwords still up to date and things like that. So otherwise, if I didn't have that connection already built, when I added a connector like Twitter here, it would have immediately prompted me to connect and type in, again, my username and password to do that. So that will happen on a number of different actions that you go to add to make sure that you have permissions and that you have the right capabilities to do that. Again, I'm going to follow it in a couple different ways. I'm going to go back here, and I can see it did kick off again. It says 52 seconds ago. I can see where it's at. It's in start and approval. Let me go back to my email. So here's my email. Here's again the body of that. Or if I wanted to, I could click on the link to that to actually go into the SharePoint list to see it there. Again, it's kind of opening up in another window here behind everything else. But there's the actual list item or document if this was a document approval. Again, I'll approve. And then I can click approve. And actually, now that I'm thinking about this, I do something just a little different. So I didn't actually click approve here yet. I will here in just a second. One of the things I was running into issues because of a connection of where I'm at in terms of connecting to Twitter. So it made me think about my mobile application. So there is a mobile app for Flow as well. I just put a real short demo on basically approving this. I have way too many windows open here. If I can get this.
Sign you're working too hard.
Well, I opened up all these GoToWebinar panels on my screen, and so everything's hiding behind. There it is, hiding behind them. All right, so the idea would be that if an approval came in just like the one that we created, I would get, and I had the Flow app on my phone. Now, no matter where I'm at, I'm sitting at my office or I'm traveling or whatever else, I get that alert. I could swipe and click to get that alert. I would then be able to click approve or reject from here. I could click on add a comment, type in a comment, and then click confirm, and that would complete my approval request. So I'll come back to this. There's a couple more here that I want to show. Give it a second. I'm waiting. I'm watching my flow in the background because it should update. I received another email just because I was the person that submitted this. This was my approval. Hey, you were approved type of email. I did not fill out the body. I kind of skipped that in the demo here, so it's okay that that's blank. And then I can see that it should have successfully sent out the message on Twitter. I had Twitter opened here to prove my point somewhere, but might be closed now, but that's okay. So we can see that process all the way through. Now I want to jump back real quickly to the mobile app just because it is really neat. Again, it's something that can be downloaded. You can see flow here. If I clicked on that, I have a panel of different things that I could do. I could go to my activities and you can see approvals are here, so it would show all the approvals that I needed to approve. I know I received an email, but this could manage them maybe a little easier if I get a lot of approvals. Maybe I ignore some of those emails. I can also click browse to see some templates and potential connectors and flows to be created. I could create, again, I can click flows. Sorry, I skipped one. I'll go back to it. Flows, we'll see all the flows that I've created. So I can click on them and get information about them. The last one, maybe I didn't create a slide for the last one. The middle one there is buttons. You can have, we're talking about triggers. One of the triggers could be a button, and that button could be clicked on from the application. So though that's kind of the mobile app and what the capabilities you have there. Joy, any other questions that I may have missed? I think I see a couple others in there. I just want to.
Do approvers need to have flow licenses? That's a good one.
That is a good one. Let me think about that a second. I think that's a good question. I apologize. Normally in a corporation, everybody's got at least, they don't have to have a elevated flow license, that's for sure, right? But a lot of Office 365 business license and enterprise license will include that ability to create flows and same time approvals.
I'm pretty sure E3 and above. Does that sound right?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
E3 and above.
Oh, for
should have it included.
Yes, but that wouldn't include, I guess, just business license as well, not just enterprise. But I can find out for sure on that as well, just to make sure that I have the licensing.
Let's see what else we got here. Is it possible to create a flow where you can set a time for it to go out? Ooh, Megan.
Ooh, good question. So yes. So you can, one of the triggers is a schedule, and then you can schedule that to go out on every so many days at this time, or once a month, or once a day. You know, so yes, one of the triggers is called a schedule, and then you can do that.
Let's see. And can you show how the approval status looks on the SharePoint list, if you wouldn't mind just going back to the list itself?
So that's another good question. So I have an approval status column that's added. Again, that's a feature of, excuse me, of just the list or library. So that's how it shows there. And again, that's kind of built into that type of, that feature on the list or library. One thing that I would say that in terms of the item that was approved, that Flow doesn't do a great job of automatically, is that when we were using SharePoint Designer, and SharePoint Designer, it automatically created a hyperlink, right? So you could click on the status of the workflow, you could click on it, and it would give you, again, kind of a rundown of the status and what's happening and comments and things like that. Flow doesn't have the same thing, at least built right in. So you can one of the actions inside of Flow is to update an item. So you could create any number of columns here on your list to populate. So a lot of times, instead of using this approval status field, I might just create a status field, and then I can write any type of text value to it that I would want from Flow. So you kind of have to build that. You kind of have to build the history of this flow of maybe date and time people approved and things like that. At least if you're not going to access the history this way, right? If you're just, this isn't necessarily super end user friendly in terms of telling them where to go and where to access this. A lot of times you want it right in the list, and to do that you kind of have to build it out a little bit yourself.
And we've got another one, and I believe this is a yes, but let's make sure. Can you save a flow as a template to send to another user so they can connect to the connectors as themselves? So that way their flows would run as them.
Yes, that's a good question. So you have a couple of different options. One, to answer your kind of exact question, yes, you can export. So I can export this as a zip kind of package, and then they would have the ability to import. I can show you the import spot here in a second. So yes, absolutely. When you import that in, you'll get questions like that on your connectors and their access, their credentials and things like that. If you wanted to add on to that question, if you wanted to just create a copy of a flow for yourself, there's also a save as, which will basically create a copy. So I do that also. If I go back here, here's where you can see that import button. So you can export it, send it, and they could import it right from there. Good question.
And we've got, I have a field in a list, it's a choice field for employee names, and I need to send the selected employee an email after the approval, but it doesn't recognize that name as an employee, probably because it's just text at that point. Any suggestions?
I might need to read that one myself here. Let's see. Field in a list choice. I'm just going to maybe make a guess. You said a choice. So I have a field in a list choice for employee names. Okay, so you have a drop down. You have a choice field, right? So again, that's Joy kind of mentioned it. That's just text. It doesn't link up to an email address. It doesn't link up to an employee profile. So it is not going to recognize that user. Now that there are options. So if this choice list that you're talking about was really like a lookup field, and you had a list of employees and a list in SharePoint, and in there maybe you had the actual like people field, that people field would know email address and stuff like that. So there might be a way to look it up depending on your scenario, but definitely the fact that it's a drop down would tell me that that's text and would not know that that's a user or that had, email address. And again, not knowing your exact situation, that's just my guess for now.
Yep, that's about the only thing I could think of too, is just doing a lookup that goes back to a list and pull the people or group field.
I see. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I see. Do you know if Yammer is a connector? So yes, you can interact with Yammer. That was another question that was up a little farther. Or maybe it was answered already if I just pull that over. I think it was.
I'm just kind of scrolling through. You guys have had some really good questions. Yep. Okay, I think we're caught up. Well, one thing to note too is Microsoft has pretty recently gone in and added, what do they call it, Terrence? Is it the request sign off?
Oh yeah, yep. So I can show that too. It's kind of built into like your document libraries. So if I just go to a document library here and I select a document, let it load here fully. Select a document, you can see, there it goes, there is a flow. Maybe there it
Notice,
goes.
yep.
And there's that. It takes a second to load, and there's a request sign off. So it's kind of like a built-in flow, you know, in SharePoint. We didn't have to build that specifically, but it's there for approvals. The other thing, just because I got it up here on the other side, and I see Joy interacted with it already. So you can see, I'm just going to go to Twitter real quick. So you can see that thank you for joining the webinar was posted. It said successfully in our flow, but we can actually see that it's there.
It's awesome when live demos work.
That's right, always.
That's how we get our adrenaline rush, guys, is we get up here in front of you all and just start doing stuff and hope the internet cooperates and all that fun stuff. Oh, one thing to say about that. Flow can be kind of picky about the browser you use. If you are in an organization that really pushes, heaven help us, Internet Explorer, you're going to have a really frustrating time working in Flow. Chrome is definitely the way to go. Personally, I'm a Firefox girl, but I still go to Chrome if I need to interact with building out a flow.
I would agree. Definitely agree. I see another question. Can an approval flow be used to allow the end user to pick any user for approval? Then can we use flow to publish the document? So yes, I want to think. So it's kind of like this request to sign off. So you can create a flow that you actually have to select an item for. And I only mention this because if you select an item and kick off the flow like we're doing this way, then you can prompt the user to fill out some information. So if actually I think I have a sample here. So it should just take just a second. Yes, I do have one right here. And I don't know if this is exactly what you're looking for, but this is one of the ways that I can see where you can achieve what you're looking. Let's see. So one of the triggers is for a selected item. And again, you can choose your site, you can choose your list, and then you have the ability to have fields, text fields, or email. And email is definitely how you'd get your user or the person that's going to approve. So you can, and again, it works just like this, where you check a document, and then actually, well, that's okay. I think I have it on my other demo list, and then the flow would show up in this list. Mm-hmm. And then you'd be able to fill out your form, you know, put the user that you want to approve and things like that in there.
And just like back in the day with SharePoint Destroyer or Designer, you can have more than one flow pointing at the same list or library, right? So if there are different things you need to do depending on the state of versions, drafts, publish, approvals, all that fun stuff, you can definitely do that here, just like we could in the olden days.
Yep.
Okay, we are about at the end of our time together today. I'm going to do last call for questions. Terrence, man, we appreciate you coming, putting this demo together. That has been fantastic.
Great, no problem. Let us know if you have any questions, even after the session today. If something comes to mind, we'll try to answer anything that you guys have.
Let me see. I'm going to throw. Let's see if I can switch presenters again. I'll go ahead and put up our contact information on the screen. She said, hopefully, there it is. So there's Terrence, there's me. Thank you so much for coming. Uh-oh, it says it doesn't, there we go, show my screen. Now maybe you're seeing it.
Yep, we see it.
Awesome. And we appreciate you guys coming. We'll hang out here for a minute or two. If any other questions pop in your mind, we'll be available. But you know how to get in touch with us. We're on Twitter. We have email. So just let us know we can help. Hope you've enjoyed it. Again, thank you, Terrence, and thank you, everyone, for the questions and comments.
Thank you, Joy, for organizing this.
You're welcome. My pleasure.